Christmas is a little under 3 weeks away, so for the next 2 weeks I'm going to show you how to create this Santa graphic. Hello my friends, welcome back to another video. My name is Rob from Button Press Graphics, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this Santa graphic, or more precisely, today I'm going to be showing you how to do the line work for this Santa graphic, and then next week I'm going to show you how to color it and how to shade it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, for any project that you want to turn a sketch into a graphic, there are a lot of different methods that you can choose, but the first thing you should do before anything else is set up your document. So to begin with, come to File and Document Properties. So if you want to copy me, then just set all your details to what you can see on screen right now and then close out of it. Now to begin with, we need to add the file or the photo of the image that we want to recreate in Inkscape. To do this, you come back to the File menu and you select Open ... When you open it, your File Explorer window will open. Navigate to wherever the file is, select the file that you want, and either double click or simply click and drag onto the canvas and let go. Once you have, you can close out of it. And if I zoom out a little bit, as you can see, this picture is way bigger than my canvas, so I am going to need to hold Shift and Control while I scale it, so I can scale it down to the right size. Now, as a good rule of thumb when it comes to using a template like I have got right here, is to open the fill and stroke menu, turn down the opacity, and then lock the image in place. In order to do this, we come up to the top toolbar here and we select for the fill and stroke, and it will open up the fill and stroke menu on the right hand side. But we are also going to need the layers menu, so you can find that by these three little dashes that say open objects on the top toolbar. Select that and it will open up this window here. Now with this tab open, you can see that the image that we currently have selected is right here, and for every other shape that we add, no matter what we do with it, as you can see with every shape there are more being added to this list of layers, but we do not need all of them. The one we're paying attention to is this one here in the center. Once you have got it selected, come to your fill and stroke. I turn the opacity down to around 40 to 50%. I think that is around the sweet spot. And then we are going to go to our layers menu and we're going to go to the image. Now when you're highlighting the image in the layers menu, you can see these three little icons. The one we need is the padlock. As soon as you select the padlock, the image will then lock in place, meaning that no matter what I do, I am not going to be able to select it, move it, or do anything else with it while that padlock is locked. And this helps in order to create the graphic over the top without moving this around and having to keep redoing it. Now when it comes to making a design like this, you can really feed into the fact that it is a cartoon design. With that, you can add strokes and varying thicknesses of strokes to give a really good professional look to your line work. So I will show you exactly what I mean. The first thing you should do is outline the entire image. So rather than outlining a single shape like his hat, for example, we are going to go around the outline of the entire image. To do this, we are going to use the pen tool. Now I understand that the pen tool is not a tool that is very easy to use, but once you do get used to it, it will become very intuitive. So I suggest practicing with it, and this would be a great way to do so. So I'm going to start from this point here, and all I am going to do is try and outline the entire image. And while I'm doing this, it's worth mentioning that you do not have to be perfect. The whole point of having a template is the fact that you can alter the image in any way you want as you're doing the line work over the top. So as you can see, what I am doing is I'm simply clicking and dragging to get the curve, and if I try to come down now, it would keep the curve here. If I zoom in, you'll be able to see more clearly. As you can see, it's going to follow the arc no matter where I move. However, if I use the right click on the mouse, it will temporarily end the selection. Then we can come back to the end of the stroke, select it, and continue with a straight line. And just like that, we have our outline. Now, the thickness of the stroke is really going to matter when it comes to your line work. So for the outline, I think a good rule of thumb is a thickness which is anywhere between 5 and 7. Now by 5 and 7, I mean 5 and 7 pixels. So if we come to our fill and stroke menu with our stroke that we just created still highlighted, we can come to the stroke style tab located right here, and I'm going to change this to 7. And as you can see, there is a much thicker line. Now I still think that that line might be a little too thick, so I'm going to reduce that to around 6. No, I think yes, 5 will be more suitable. Now we have an outline, we can start creating the shapes on the inside. The perfect example I can show you regards the brim on his hat. So this section here, it's what we will call a closed path. So for example, if I was to create a simple line like this, this is an open path because both of the ends are not connected. However, if we were to connect them together, it is now a closed path. Something to keep in mind when you're doing line work. Now for this section of Santa's hat, the only thing we need to do is decrease the width of the stroke and make the shape of the brim of his hat. But again, we are not going to include these little bits here on the inside. We are simply going to create an outline around the entire shape. Now when it comes to overlapping the outline, make sure that your line is always hidden and it follows the contours of any curves. For example, as you can see, the curve comes around and down and then flicks quite sharply to go across. As long as I manage to get this line to match up with this one, it will look good. And when you're done, you should be left with something that looks a little bit like this. Now we don't want the thickness of this stroke to be the same as the outline stroke. No other stroke in this image should be as thick as the outline. So we're going to make sure this is lower than 5. If I go with around a 4 thickness, I think that would be around perfect. Let's have a look. And it is. 4 seems to be good. I'm going to see if I can squeeze it down to maybe 3. Yeah, I think 3 works a little bit better. Now with this shape selected, as you can see, there are some sharp corners on the edges here where it's overlapping. Well, for this we need to use the Edit Paths by Nodes tool. Now if we zoom in, we can individually take the nodes and slightly move them so you get more of a gradual curve than a sharp edge like this. And just by tweaking the handles, as you can see, now it looks way better. Now all that's left to do is to finish the rest of the line work. So I'm going to use this little bit here and come down to the side of his face and do all these extra lines, but I'm going to leave the mustache, the mouth, the tongue, the nose and the eyes and his face here alone, because I'm going to show you another method that you can use which might help you in certain situations. And like I said before, please remember that this does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to follow the template exactly. If you see any areas that you wish to improve or you think could look better by just slightly shifting the line, then do so. If it doesn't work, you can always delete it and do something else. I am also going to add the lines to these parts here, the little extra lines. Again, just try and follow the contours of every curve so it looks a lot more fluid. For example, if I was to try and copy the template exactly and have the line coming up like so, it doesn't quite look right. It doesn't follow the curve correctly. However, now if I follow this curve here, coming from the bottom up and around, it would come this way, and then I can make it go a slight bit vertical so it looks more fluid. For example, just like this. And now if I was to increase the thickness of this to match the rest, which is 3 points, as you can see, it now follows that curve way better. And don't worry about these little sharp corners. You can go around and you can alter them and tweak them so they look perfect. And now that I've done all the line work, as you can see, it is already starting to look so much better. Now when it comes to all the rest, you can go through each of the lines and you can alter the thickness and tweak their positions until you get to a position that you like and you can work with. So that is exactly what I'm going to do now. Now once you're finished, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Once you do, you might notice that I have left this little mark here. Well, I've left that on purpose to show you an extra little trick. As you know, the outline itself is 5 pixels wide, and everything on the inside, like these, are all 3. Well, for any detail lines like this one, you would want to reduce it again. So you could use your pen tool like you have been doing up until this point, create the shape like so, and then simply increase the thickness to around 1.5, which is half the thickness of the others around here. And now when I deselect off everything, you can see it's not as imposing as the rest of the lines. So it helps to give the picture a lot more depth, and that is going to help massively in next week's video when it comes to colouring and shading. Now this next step is not one you necessarily have to do, but it can help you massively if you have a certain project like this. As you can see, this section of Santa's face is enclosed by all the other shapes. So this can be made into one big shape. I'll show you exactly what I mean. By using the pen tool, we can then go around the outline, which is these 2 bits on either side of the face, and then we can just overlap the top shape and this bottom shape here. And just like that, we now have a face. But what about the overlapping parts? How do we get rid of them? Well, that's easier than you might think. If we come to the select tool, and then we select the brow of his hat, remember all these are the individual shapes, but the actual main shape is a closed path. So we can then duplicate this closed path by right clicking and selecting duplicate, and then if we hold shift and press on the shape we just created, we can come to path difference, and as you can see, it has now cut away everything that was overlapping the hat. And if I was to move this out of the way, it still kept it as a closed path, but it's now matching the hat perfectly. And we're going to do exactly the same method when it comes to the nose and his mustache. So for his nose, we are simply going to use one of the ellipses by selecting the circle and ellipses tool on the left hand side, come over to where his nose is, click and drag until we get an approximation of his nose. Using the select tool, I can just get it situated in the place I want it. And if you want to give a slight point to the bottom of the nose, which always looks kind of good in a cartoon graphic, you can come to your edit paths by nodes, and once you have gone to path, object to path, and have the 4 nodes on each side of the circle, you can simply click and drag one down slightly, and it will give it a slight point. Now when it comes to the nose, it is a circular shape. However, we do not need the fill color, so we're just simply going to come down to the color swatches at the bottom, and we are going to hold shift and press the black to give it a black stroke, and then we are going to let go of shift and select the X to get rid of the fill color. Of course, you will want to make sure that the stroke for this shape matches the stroke for everything else. So in this case, for this project, it is a stroke width of 3. And just like that, we now have a nose. So now we are going to do the mustache. And now we have these two shapes, we are going to repeat the same process that we used with the top of his face with the hat right down here at the bottom. So using the select tool, we are going to select the nose first, right click and duplicate, and then hold shift and select the face, and then go to path, difference. And again, if I was to move this shape, as you can see, the shape of the nose has now been cut out. If the nose disappears, it's because you simply did not duplicate it first. Because as soon as you do this process, it will get rid of the shape that you selected to begin with. So now if we do exactly the same again, we are going to come to the mustache, right click, duplicate, and then we're going to hold shift, select the face, and then go to path, difference. And again, if we move the stuff out of the way, you can see just what it's done. Finally, we're going to do it one more time, but this time we are going to use the nose and the mustache. So we're going to select the nose, we're going to right click, duplicate, then we're going to hold shift and select the mustache, and I'm sure you've got this by now, path, difference. Now as you can see, the face is one complete shape, the nose is still its own complete shape, and the mustache is also still a complete shape. Now of course, do not forget, select the shapes that you have just created and make sure that the stroke matches everything else. Next we are going to do the mouth with the tongue. So first off, we're going to create a circle which will match the shape of the mouth. So like I mentioned earlier, you do not have to be exact. I have shortened it slightly to get the face more central and get his mouth more central underneath his nose. Now also, just to show you, you do not have to do the same method that I'm choosing here, because since 1.3.1 was released, we now have the shape builder tool, which can make things a lot easier to understand. So instead of using the path difference approach, you can also select the shapes that you want to alter by holding shift when you select them, and then go to the shape builder tool right here. As you can see, you've now got the shapes that you have selected. All you have to do now is select the shapes you want to keep. So I want to keep this mouthpiece there. I want to keep these shapes here, but I do not want these lines, so I'm going to click and drag across. And as for this shape, there is no need for this shape, so I'm going to hold shift and you will see the plus icon turn into a minus, and then it turns pink. Once it turns pink, you can keep holding shift, left click, and it will get rid of the shape for you. Once you are done, come up to the top toolbar where it has the green tick, click it. Now you have the same result but with a different method. And just to show you again, I'm going to use the tongue as an example. So I'm going to use the pen tool. I'm going to do the outline of the tongue like so. Again, it doesn't matter if it overlaps at the bottom because we're going to use the shape builder tool to get rid of that. So now with it selected, we're going to come back to our select tool, hold shift and select the mouth, and then go to shape builder, and again we are going to keep this shape, we're going to keep this shape, and we're going to get rid of this by holding shift and selecting that. Now when we come to finish, you can see there are two different shapes. Now this one is still only thin, so we are going to increase the width stroke to the same as everything else, and as you can see, it has now matched up perfectly. Now the advantages to using the shape builder tool is because it is a lot easier, but the reason I don't use it as much as a lot of people do is simply because of little issues that you might come across when you're trying to add detail to your images. I will give you an example. If I undo everything that I just did with the shape builder tool, as you can see, I have now got the two shapes. But if I duplicate this shape and I repeat the process that we used up here, I can hold shift and then I can go to path, and this time intersection. Now what that has done, it has created the tongue shape that I initially wanted when I was using the shape builder tool, but instead of cutting out where the tongue is and just leaving the rest, we now have the full mouth. So if we was to select this shape, turn it black for example, and then select this shape and turn it red, you can see the difference it makes. But you can go one step further. I'm just going to come down to the color swatches, hold shift and press X to get rid of the outline, and then if I zoom in, you can add to this by using your pen tool, and if you turn on snapping, it might make it a little easier. It's going to snap to the center, and I'm going to click and come down slightly at a slight curve, and then come up and click and drag again to get that ever so slight curve, and then just close the path. Now with that created and selected, we can go to our select tool, hold shift to select the tongue, and then go to path, difference. Now when I add the tongue into the mouth, it gives a much better effect. Finally, I want to create the eyes and the eyebrows. Now the eyes are easy to create. It is simply just a stretched circle and another stretched circle inside to give the impression that light is hitting the eyes. So we're going to create an eyeball like this. We're going to make sure it's black by selecting black on the color swatches in the bottom left corner, and then using the select tool, I am going to right click, duplicate, and then hold Control while I click and drag it to the side. Now if you want to make sure that these circles are perfectly aligned with each other, you can hold shift to select them both, and then you can come up to the top properties toolbar, and where it says group, ungroup, you will group them, and then holding shift you can select the nose and then go to your align and distribute menu, which can be found right here if you haven't already got it open. When you select it, it will open up on the right hand side, and with last selected from the drop down menu, if you come to this center icon here where it says center on vertical axis, it will move the eyes to be perfectly central around the nose. With that done, you can click off everything, and even though it doesn't match my template, if I was to zoom out, as you can see, it looks way better because now they are perfectly central. So now we are simply going to repeat this process, but we are going to make the circles white. you now have 2 eyeballs. As I said, very simple. Finally, for the last thing to create, we are going to go to the pen tool, and we are simply going to create a line going from point to point, and then click and drag all the way up like so. I'm going to right click to temporarily deselect it, then click this end, and then click and hold this end and do it again, just like so. Now with that shape created, you can turn that black, and of course right click, duplicate, and then hold Control using the select tool to drag it along. But as you can see, it's slightly off because this point is higher than this one. For that, all you have to do is come up to the properties toolbar at the top and select to flip it horizontally, and there you go. And then when I zoom out, you have created your Santa graphic. But there is one last thing that can make this design way better than a normal design. That is using one of the advanced features. We are going to be using a path effect. So I'm going to use this stroke here as an example. When it comes to the path effects, they are more of the advanced features, but if you can start learning them, your designs will elevate exponentially. So for this one, we're going to use a path effect called taper stroke. Now in order to get the path effects menu open, come to path, scroll right the way down to where it says path effects ... Select that, and this menu will open up on the right hand side. With the stroke selected that you want to edit, which is this one, come to the arrow, click it, and it will give you a list of all the different path effects that you can use. For this, all we need is the taper stroke path effect, which can be found right here. Now as soon as you select it, as you can see, it has now changed the stroke so it comes to a point. Now for the taper stroke, these are all the properties that you can see. You will not need most of these, so all I am going to get you to concentrate on for this design is the stroke width, and as long as it is set to what we previously set it to, which is 3, then it will not be a problem. Once you have the path effect selected on the stroke and you have something that looks like this, go to the edit paths by nodes tool, and as you can see, now you no longer just get the 2 handles on either end of the stroke. You also get these little blue diamonds here near each end. These are how much the stroke will be affected by the tapered stroke. So if I pull this up, as you can see, it gets very thin on the bottom end. We don't want it to be thin there, so I'm going to put that all the way down as far as it will go, and then I am going to use the top one and drag that down to give more of a point. Once you have done, go to path, object to path. Now when you object to path, this can happen, but do not fret. All that has happened is Inkscape has switched the fill with the stroke. So what you're seeing now is the stroke outline because we have changed this to a path and not a stroke. So in order to get back to the shape that you want, all you have to do is come down to the color swatches at the bottom, hold shift and select the X to get rid of the stroke, and then let go of shift and press the black swatch to fill it in, and you will end up with something like this. As you can see, just with that one line, it makes it look a whole lot better. So now you're just going to see me going through all the different strokes like these and tapering the stroke of every one, and then I will catch up with you at the end. And there you go. As you can see, the taper stroke path effects makes a massive difference when it comes to the detail of your design. And finally, one last thing to complete the line work of this design is to simply round the corners. By this I mean, if you come to your select tool and then select the outline, as you can see there are a lot of points, which can be good sometimes, but that's not what I want. I want it to be soft, rounded, just like Santa. So I'm going to come to the fill and stroke menu here, and where it says join, cap and order, we are going to make sure that the join and the cap are both rounded by selecting the rounded cap and the rounded join. And that's it, my friends. You have now created Santa with the line work. Join me next week and I will show you how to add some colour and some shading to take it to the next level. If you found this tutorial helpful, please by all means let me know, and if you haven't already, I would love it if you could hit the subscribe button. Until next time, I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell, say thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.